Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September Southern Fried DNN User Group meeting. We are excited to have a good group of folks online, a good group of friends here in person, and we're going to go through a range of different topics in today's meeting. I'll give an introduction in just a moment to the topics that we're going to go through, but want to go ahead and mention the range of things that we're going to go through tonight. So myself, I will be giving a presentation on DNN URL redirects and 404 handler type things. And that's going towards a new section or a new topic that we're going to start up within Southern Fried here, where we take your questions. We take your items that you know a little bit about and you want to know more about. Your unanswered questions that you've asked 3 people and no one has an answer for you, bring them to us. We want to help answer those questions for you. And tonight we're going to start off with one of those questions, and I'll give you the setup for that as we get into it. We're also going to get an update on nvQuickSite from David Poindexter. He's going to go through and tell us a little bit about what's coming up next, and we'll look forward to that. But we're going to kick things off with DNN community and buzz and announcements. That includes DNN Summit as well. Obviously, since the last meeting, we've had a couple of meetings. There's been a lot of activity in the DNN community. Most all of that is really growing from the meetings and the conversations that everyone's hearing from Andy Treba as he goes through and starts getting connected with everyone, not only within DNN Corp, but within the community as well. And from my own experience, it's pretty darn exciting. Clint's quote earlier was that after we had a meeting, it was all we could do to jump up and celebrate and crack open a few beers because we were pretty excited. So Clint, let me pass it over to you to talk a little bit about community buzz. There was a meeting earlier this morning that was a presentation. I don't think the link for that is online yet, but we'll post it up when it is. But you want to give us a little bit of a recap about that, and then we'll chime in too?
Yeah, so as far as community announcements, you know, I don't have a ton here because I don't have my list, so I'm kind of ill prepared. But as far as DNN Summit, I would like to remind everyone that DNN Summit is coming up in February. David corrected me because I recently said January 1, so I appreciate that. And so as far as DNN Summit, you can go .org, it'll be, are you trying to type that in? DNNSummit.org?
I'm not getting a period is what my problem was.
No comment. Yeah, so Ryan, you are going to get me the training information, right? So we should be, do you have an update on that?
No, absolutely. I'm going to get you that training information, and I can put in the note that at the next DNN User Group meeting, we're going to do an overview of the 4 different training sessions that are occurring at DNN Summit this year, talk a little bit about the materials and the information that's going to be gone through in those. So we'll look forward to that at a next meeting, but of course you'll have that to promote well beforehand.
Okay, yeah, so we should be going live very soon on DNN Summit website with training information. Also, the speaker selection is getting, very close to being live. Just got word from Mitchell earlier today that, we're getting pretty close with that. So the website should have a lot more information coming up pretty soon regarding DNN Summit. Yeah, and so...
Have you heard any information, Clint, have you heard any information on registration for hotel space or slopes or anything else like that? I remember last year, pretty early on, it started filling up. We're not reaching any of those numbers yet, are we?
No, I don't think we've got any, like we're not at capacity or anything like that. So, I mean, we should have good space at this point. I think a lot of people are waiting to, see who speakers are and get more information. We do have people registering, but it's not like, we're at capacity. So that is DNN Summit. As far as the meeting recap, again, I was kind of at work, so I wasn't able to be like 100% focused on the meeting. But what I gathered, it was, an interview with Andy Treba, the new CEO, and he was just, conveying a lot of the stuff that we've been seeing in the blogs. He did it in person and live. And it was interesting because they took some surveys during the webinar. Asked people, what do you think about the support plans, because they rolled out some new support plans, different offerings like for community and, different levels. And then they would take a poll, and they would play, some neat music or upbeat music during the poll. And they did that like 3 times. But he was just, reinforcing his commitment to the community, being very transparent. I'm trying to think of the things that he added in there. Were you guys able to get on the meeting? What else am I missing here? It's just he was talking about reviving the community a lot. He talked about the support plans and just the roadmap for DNN Corp. I don't remember a bunch of bullet points on that. He said he believed in a smaller DNN Corp and a bigger DNN community. I remember that. And he's very action and metrics driven. Those were some takeaways that I got. So he wants to do things, he wants to measure them, take some benchmarks, see what happens, and kind of monitor and adjust. So it was a very, very positive meeting, from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody want to chime in with any of their thoughts?
Yeah, quite transparent on wanting to right some old wrongs too, and that was very encouraging.
Yep, I was going to say the same thing, that just from, demeanor isn't the right word, but just from presentation and comfortable, relaxed nature of conversation and just straightforward, honest speak, I get very excited when Andy's talking about different things, because I'm just seeing a lot of honest, open communication, and it's very exciting. Also, I'll reiterate that point to sounding like and giving a description that this isn't short-term immediate work. There is immediate work to be done, but that what they are structuring and organizing for is the 2- and the 3-year longer-term plan, and then that's a short version in the 6- and longer year plan. Moving soon to real action and accomplishment, to speak louder than words, is the sense that I got from Andy in a couple of different conversations. So I'm incredibly optimistic is a small description of how I'm feeling, and I think a lot of people are feeling about it. Anybody else online want to join in on chat or unmute your microphones and throw in an extra word there or two? I also saw Joe Brinkman come in online a few minutes ago. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Ryan. Yeah, I think I'll hold my comments for now.
Yeah, no worries. All right. Well, good to see everybody. Clint, other community buzz. I asked before we started a session that we had some roadmap descriptions that in November we were looking at a possibility for 9.2 for DNN, but I don't know if that's still on plan or on track. So when we know something more about it, we'll try and let you know. Maybe we'll ping a few people and see what we can find out before next user group meeting, if nothing else.
Right. Yeah, I don't have much info on that. I'm kind of not as up to date on that. One other thing about the meeting today, Andy did give a little bit of background on himself and kind of how the ESW capital company views their business model. So he listed out kind of like the 1, 2, 3 of a typical model, and then he showed how theirs is kind of inverted. So I'll just echo or reiterate what you said about everything. The verbiage being used is all like long-term in nature, so it's definitely a strategic play. But that's all I've got for community this week.
Well, we will post the link to that video when that does get posted, and we'll put that on our SoFri website so that everybody can go and catch it. If you missed it, you'll be able to join in. From that, I will go ahead and start on my presentation section of the meeting. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we're trying to do and why. Some of our planning for the Southern Fried meetings that are coming up, they want to shake up the structure of what we've been doing. Interviews and people coming on for presentations is absolutely still at the core of what we want to be doing, but we want to introduce a little bit more variety and a little bit more in the way of different types of content and presentation that we do. That includes sometimes having the European group come on, and in those situations, once a quarter or so, we're going to try and have one of those where we'll do them during the daytime and on different days to catch the European group and whatever presentation they want to do from, from people we haven't had a chance to hear from. So we're going to be doing that once a quarter. Additionally, once a quarter, we're still reaching out to and having everyone else that we normally connect with on this side of the pond. But we're also throwing in some other types of material or content for meetings. And today is one of the first meetings that we're going to run in the question and answer series of items. I might have mentioned that at the end of one of the last meetings. But the idea is that unless you're part of the Facebook group or you're posting things onto the right board and you happen to catch a response, there are questions that sometimes you can't get a quick answer to, or they're involved and therefore you only find a limited answer online, and you need a group of people to bounce those questions off of and get ideas on how to approach things. And that's what we're here for. And we want to make a space for that here inside of Southern Fried. So this is the first meeting in a session of question and answers. On Twitter, we'd love to take your questions. You hit us up by email. You catch us on Facebook. Post us the questions that you have that you'd like to see. And if they're long enough, we'll put them into a longer presentation. If they're short enough, we'll put them in a shorter meeting, and we'll just go through and quick rapid-fire answer a bunch of questions at once. But today's is about URL redirects and a specific problem that I was asked by someone who was migrating an existing website that actually wasn't another management system like WordPress or something else like that. It was a hard-coded website, and they had a range of HTML-related files. Everything was either an extension of HTML or HTML, and in migrating over to DNN and setting up this brand new DNN website, the question was, how do I get my redirects to properly go from one old page to the new, brand new DNN page if my 404 isn't even coming up to handle, it's giving something entirely different than as if it was a .NET page, etc. So that was the core of the question, and I thought I'd spin it a little bit larger and turn it into a presentation about URL management in general in DNN. This isn't going to be an in-depth study. I'm not going to look at 18 different modules and talk about the pros and cons of each, but I am probably going to mention about that many modules. What we're going to do is run through a blog post that I have posted over to the Southern Fried website, and we're going to go through screenshots, and I don't know if you can see, but the tab list of tabs that we have open here is a laundry list of items that we're going to go through and talk about. So without further interruption or introduction, I'm going to jump into this. So to begin with, let's talk a little bit about the history of DNN URLs and redirects. I'll start the story really back with DNN 5, maybe DNN 4, in which there were, to my knowledge, primarily two major URL providers that you were able to install in DNN. And these URL providers allowed you to go from a page format that was going to be tab ID 177 default.aspx or default.aspx question mark tab ID equals 177 for a URL query string based version of a URL, and it gave you that ability to have a search engine friendly URL. Not only could it be my-page-name, but it could also be without the .aspx extension. I don't know about you, but back in those early days of, I think, the industry or the market of clients, they didn't know what .aspx was, and it worried them. What is that in my URL? Does it have to be there? Can't it just be HTML? Or can't I just have nothing at all? I've seen that on some other WordPress websites. We get a lot of that. So primarily, around that time, We used, for quite a while, DNN Masters, SEO URL provider. You remember that one? Yeah. Otherwise, I think the general king of the URL rewriting world was iFinity URL Master module, and that was, that was pretty much the biggest selling URL rewriter that was in the DNN community. And again, you could take your DNN 4 and 5 and 6 certainly sites and really transform the way URLs were being handled, and that was a big deal. That iFinity URL rewriter was purchased and rolled into DNN Core. That happened in 2012. That was right around version 7.1 of DNN. And since then, we've had that as part of the core of DNN and have been able to use it and benefit from it right out of the box when you install DNN. Now you have to activate some things, you've got some settings you can play around with, but it is there, and that has continued DNN 7 and 8 and 9 going forward. So now that it is integrated into the core, we are easily able to see on the page settings screen of a page, we are able to see the page URL, and in that location we are able to set up or manage our own custom URL that we want to have in place for that. So if we want it to be page-name or page-title, or we want to change those things, we're able to do that right there in the page settings. We press save, and that in general is all that it takes. Behind the scenes, some different things are happening though. And if you rename a page multiple times, you may find that it is creating multiple records inside of the tabs URL table, in which it is actually taking the most recent one and turning that into a status 200 version of a URL, and then taking your old ones and keeping them in place for a redirect legacy, and having those display 301 permanent moved statuses. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment to show you where you see that and how you see that. But a short version before I kind of go on further is that the core of that SEO-friendly URL handler is still the same nuts and bolts that you were used to with the iFinity URL rewriter. And to some extent, for those of us who knew how to use that iFinity URL rewriter with those original screens and interfaces, it makes more sense. You've spent time knowing how it works behind the scenes, and now it's just kind of built into the system, and having a little bit of knowledge about how iFinity used to work helps you. But short of that, many of the articles that describe the problems you can run into, troubleshooting issues, working around things with editing the regex for the rules that are going on with it, those things all still pertain to the current version of what you find inside of DNN Core. So that's a good point for me to go ahead and link to and mention that the iFinity.com, Bruce Chapman's original site and his company there, are still up. Those blog articles, those tips on how to manage URL redirects, how to work around problems, how to manage different IIS settings so that you can handle things that are strange, one-off kind of occurrences, those are all still there. So if you spent any time really digging into that in the past, those resources are still available to you. And again, they may not all completely apply, but many of those things still do, especially in principle for things where he's talking about the larger scheme of handling or handing off things to IIS and over to the .NET handler in different circumstances. So this is one of the links that I put up here, and this is a good introduction to understanding how DNN handles these French URLs and how the rewriting process goes. And again, this is my go-to article when I need to describe this to people, because he goes through and talks about the terms of URL rewriting and friendly URLs. He talks about how things are handled within the application, in that there is URL rewriting, and then there's the redirects, and then there's the friendly versions, and how they all work together and are kind of brought together under one. And at the end of that, you get a lot of good conversation. So I think this is a good starting article. If you're just getting into learning about this, again, it's a really good start. Now there is one thing to mention, and maybe this isn't the case anymore with newer versions of DNN, but you know, back in DNN 7, back in DNN 8, you weren't always at a brand new fresh installation running with the advanced version of the DNN URL rewriter in action. I think settings. So one of the very first things that I want to talk about is in your web.config of your DNN instance, going in and looking for the DNN-friendly URL line. That DNN-friendly URL line really doesn't have anything else that you need to worry about changing to activate other than changing that URL format from human-friendly to advanced. Once you move it to advanced, then all of the actions and activities of the Eyefinity-like URL rewriting actions are going to take effect, and anything else that we're going to be talking about today really hinges on the fact that you've got to have that advanced mode turned on. And it's not on by default in older DNN versions. So it's a good point in the conversation to mention that. You do have to turn it on. Simple edit, you edit your web.config, you save, that's saving automatically restarts your application pool, if not, restart it, and you're good to go. After that, by default, you should automatically see URLs drop off the .aspx, and you should start seeing dashes in between the titles of files. But turning on the core URL rewriter there doesn't get you everything you're needing to manage things and to really work on it. My phrasing here is, where are the missing controls? Where are the controls you're looking for? In Professional Edition of DNN in Evoke, you have those controls in place. In Community Edition of DNN, you can run X3's DNN URL Management module. That's from the company X3. They have put that out. I'm providing links here to their Codeplex and then to a kind of a fork of it on GitHub. I'd love to reach out to the community and get this one. All I see is, officially from X3 is the Codeplex version. I haven't seen anything on GitHub from them.
It is. Will, I don't know if you made any more progress with them on that or not, but I think he got it moved over to GitHub, didn't he?
I'd love to replace the link that I have with the official version, because what I posted a link to is a fork of it. So I'd love to get the official version and put it in here.
Yeah, because we convinced him to get it over onto GitHub.
It's an important thing. Everybody should understand that Codeplex is going away. That is one of the links I have here. Let's jump over to that. Anything else that you run across that you love in the DNN community? Codeplex was certainly, for a long time, the location where open source items were going, and Codeplex as a system is shutting down and is going away. So if you have things that you used to love that you would go to inside of Codeplex, please reach out to the maker, reach out to us. We will try and track them down. That's something that we would love to do to make sure we don't lose anything when Codeplex goes away. But again, what I've linked to at the moment is a fork of it. So it is there, but I want to try and have the official version to link to. But coming back to it, what does this module give you, and what do you get out of it? Let me talk just a little bit about the installation steps, and then we're going to go through some of the screenshots of it and talk a little bit about what it does. You found it? Great. I pass it over to you. Okay, so to begin with, installing this module installs just like any other normal module. I will give one little caveat there. To begin with, I normally like to go ahead and turn on the advanced version for the URL, for DNN-friendly URL. So I have that in there as my step number 1 for installing this module. Step number 2, you go ahead and install the module like normal. But then I want you to set up 2 blank pages. I would like you to put a page underneath of host and call it host URL management, and then I want you to create a second page underneath of admin and call it portal URL management. A thing to understand is that this module lives in both a host level page as well as in a portal level page. So then as you add future portals into this website, you either need to begin with a template that has this admin portal URL page in place, or you need to remember to create it additionally every time so that you can have the portal level settings in place. Otherwise, it can create problems, if nothing else, to have you looking for where your pages are. Once you've created those blank pages, go to the host page and install the X3 DNN URL Management module on that host level page. When you install this module, like some other older DNN modules, it installs 2 modules onto the page at the same time. It installs a host version of the module, and it installs an admin version of the module. What you can then do is go to the module settings for the admin module, which is the second one on the screen. And in the advanced tab of settings, you can simply say move to another page, and at that point, select your admin page that you've already created, and it goes over to that other page. Once you've done that, go back to your host level page and then back to your admin level page, and just simply press save on those settings. Because there are some settings in it that haven't been applied at the host level, or more importantly to that portal level, and just press save. Some of those default settings so that you're able to run off of those to begin with. So let's talk a little bit about what it looks like and what it does out of the box. To begin with, I'll bring up the host level version of the module. Main thing is that the default settings here are ones that we generally use without any changes. You might set some regular expressions so that you could exclude some things from rewriting or include other things in rewriting or change the rules of rewriting. But I'd caution you against that a little bit because there's also regular expressions control inside of the admin portal version. And to me, I feel that it's safer to do that at a portal level because you may not want to have these exclusions across your whole DNN instance. So in general, there's not really much that I personally change on the host version of this particular module. The portal level of the module has 3 tabs, and I'm going to go through tab 1 and tab 3, and I'll stop back off on tab 2. To begin with, the first settings that I make on a website instance when this is brand new is I go ahead and select my error 404 page. I have other web config settings for my error handler, and I'll talk about those too in a moment. But I always go ahead and select my error pages. I personally don't bother having something different between a 500 and a 404 type of response, but you certainly can have different responses there for those 2 types of pages. So I set the pages on these, and normally at that point I just press update, and it's in good shape. Just so you'll understand, there are some controls that you can have here that are useful. Replace these characters is a field which lets you control what characters are going to be removed out of any URLs. Maybe you need to have those characters in URLs, but these are the defaults that are going to be removed out and replaced with dashes, essentially. So if you are needing to have some of these symbols inside of URLs, you can work on getting them in there. If you need to remove other characters from URLs because they happen frequently, you can also remove them by adding in more characters that are going to be replaced. We have some clients, for instance, that copy and paste all the time, so they will have registered marks and TMs and copyright symbols inside of titles of things, and we want to have those removed out automatically out of the URLs. So you can certainly add to that replace these characters field. The more important field, or tab, that I want to talk about for a few moments is this Custom Page URLs tab. That is the power. This is the missing control that you've been looking for if you are familiar with the original iFinity URL rewriter controls. And I'll kind of describe this from top to bottom. Just be careful because you can ruin something. Yes, yes. Yeah. You can absolutely create a redirect loop. And you can break, if not a page, you can break your whole site if you're not doing it the wrong way. And if you do have a problem, you break something, remember that you can back out of that by changing your web.config and moving back to human-friendly URL instead of advanced. You could also go to the tabs URLs table in the database, and you can work on and remove items. Just remember that this is heavily cached information. So if you do go into the database and edit it directly, you need to restart your application pool and clear cache. to your cache. And if your website is unresponsive, the best way to do that is to stop the website and restart it again to restart the application pool, or use an app offline type file to restart your application pool. But back to this particular screen. This is, again, the admin version of this module, and on this third tab, Custom Page URLs, you were able to select a page of your website. And that's a standard DNN control, so that you're able to see a menu tree of your pages, and you're able to type to search for specific pages. Once you have selected a specific page, it will show you any redirects that have been set up for that particular page. And redirect probably isn't the best word here, or the only word to use, because this is also your control of your friendly URLs and what responses you get for specific URL setup for your different pages. So to begin with, if you are working on a page that has never been renamed and it does not have any other information in it, then this table that we're seeing here will be empty. And we will simply have system-generated URL present at the bottom of that screen, because there are no other friendly URLs or redirects that have been set up. So don't be concerned if you don't see anything there. If that's the case, then there's only one, and that one is getting your 200 response. At that point, you know that you're, if that's what you want, then you're in good shape. If you don't want that, then this is your chance to come in and start making some edits and changes. You're able to click this plus button to add in a new custom URL. And at that point, if there are multiple portal aliases, you're able to choose which one it applies to. And you put in the URL here that you want this to listen to, you want this to look for, and respond to with the specific page that you have selected. Here, this example is a staff/contributors page. And we can see that about/staff-contributors is the current one that we want to have as the prominent one. So it's marked as active. It has a 200 response. So a crawler or a user hits this URL, it's going to be a proper response, and it's going to load status 200. Other ones here, though, are things like about/about us with no dash. Maybe that was a previous version of something that was a folder. In this particular case, it might have been something where that was about us/index.html or something like that. At that point, that folder level is getting a 301 redirect value. That 301 redirect value is going to tell Google crawlers, it's going to tell browsers as they're going through, as it redirects to the proper version of this URL, the proper page, that was a 301 permanent redirect. This is the new URL for that particular page. But it obviously can be something completely different structure-wise. So the third example there is our-staff as the URL, and it's also giving a 301 redirect. So this screen inside of your portal management is missing control. This is part of what we spent so much time doing inside of Bifinity URL Rewriter, was coming in to manage these redirects, especially for situations where you were transferring from old, you were moving old sections and rearranging the structure of a website. It's very useful from a manual sense for you to see everything that's here. I've also used this inside of DNN 7 and DNN 8, certainly, to help correct problems. Because sometimes we'll get into a page where I swear we've renamed that page and we have it correct, and I'll come in and I'll see that it shouldn't be this way, but inside of the records that it's listing out, I have 2 of them that have status 200. And I have 2 other ones that have status 301. So I go, let me go in and enforce. Okay, I only want 1 status 200, the rest of them are status 301. This is your way to audit. Now, it's a page at a time, obviously, but it is your way to audit. I'll go ahead and take a break from these screens to mention that these records are stored in the tab URLs database table. Dustin and I, in our approach to DNN, we do a lot of stuff straight in the database, for better or worse, and heckling that you want to give us at community events. We do a lot of stuff in the database because that's the way we think and that's the way we do things the fastest. And if you do need to manage stuff or look at it at a larger view, it is all pretty straightforward in that it is connected to tab IDs and it's here inside of that tab URL table. Again, I mentioned it already, but if you do make edits and changes to this tab URLs table, remember to clear your cache, and for good measure, just restart your app pool, because these things are heavily cached inside of DNN instances most often. Before I leave this screen, I do want to check in on the chat windows and things like that. Maybe David or Clint. Has anybody asked any questions about what we're seeing so far? You know, for many of us, this may be recap, or this may be old news that we know. But you know, if you're getting introduced to DNN, or you've been using it and you didn't know where those controls went, and now you're finding about X3 for the first time, hopefully this is still a pretty good introduction for you for these things.
The only question was Pete was asking about the links. You know, all these different pages you're going to, and I told him we post them in the blog tomorrow, so that we'll have access.
Absolutely. The blog post is already live. If you do go to Southern Fried DNN and options for real URL redirects in DNN is the blog article that I published this afternoon. So that it is here, and I will continue to update it with some of these links if we get correct versions and some other stuff to put in. But the screenshots, the link are off there.
Rod, would this be equivalent to the HDA access or the route file in the PHP world?
That's a really good question, and I'm going to come to that, because there is still one or two things that you can do like that easily inside of an HD access file in the Linux, in the LAMP world, that I wish you could do inside of .NET, and you approach it a different way. It is so easy to make redirect rules inside of HD access, and it's just a common thing that LAMP developers take for granted. We just have a different way to approach it, and especially inside of DNN, we have a different way to approach it, and I'll show some of those in just a minute. So perfect segue. So the second tab inside of this Portal URL Manager module is regular expressions, and I want to mention this to describe that this is your way to create exceptions to the rule. This is your way to create other types of pattern or activity. And this information, when not to rewrite, site URLs only, do not redirect, this information is gone over in volumes inside of the iFinity URL original website. Bruce has spent a lot of time, not only in meetings, but in blog posts, talking about how each of those different settings make a difference and what you can do, and they overlap with each other and they're exceptions, so it can get very complicated. But just as a very simple example, you can have a page inside of your website where you are handling things with query strings and you never want DNN to rewrite, and you always want that to load with your full set of query strings. In that situation, you're able to go in and put that into your do not rewrite, and if you look very closely, you can see that the link click ASPX file, that handler for files, is present in there, and that's a good example. You want that to load as link click.aspx with your full set of query strings unchanged, unrevised, and that's a good example for you to go through if you're needing to make exclusions to the rule. There are some other ones in here, and again, I'm not going to go through those in this, but do know that you can find them on the iFinity URL website, and bring them back up. We'll answer questions again. Okay, so at this point, we've talked about what's built into the DNN core. We've talked about the missing controls and getting them back in Community Edition so that you can see how to manage these URLs. I've described to you that ultimately they're in the database, so you can do some power management of those things if you need to, including doing bulk import. If you have hundreds of files from an old website, you've crawled it, you know their old URLs, you can very easily bulk import into the database here and get that running. At this point, I'm going to talk for just a moment about one of my favorite old modules. Because of settings that we've used lately in DNN 7 and certainly in DNN 8, we're not able to use this module anymore. I think it's still possible to use the module, and I'll mention it because of that. I'll also put it out there as an encouragement if anyone else is interested in it and wants to know more about it, or developers want to build a newer version of it to work in DNN 8 and 9. Love to talk to you about my my list of things to go into it. But it's an older module. It's called the HJT. That was the name of the company, HJT Central. HJT Redirect. This was a module that was fairly resource intensive. I did have a call once or twice from PowerDNN or Manage.com who said, what is this module? You need to take this off this page. So I will mention that it's resource intensive, but that's because of what it was doing. And it was resource intensive on websites that had a giant amount of error 404 page traffic. So it was not that it sat there using a lot of resources when unused. If a website or a domain has that issue, it could be the biggest running thing inside your DNN instance. And I'll kind of describe that. So HJT Redirect was or is a module that you would place onto your error 404 page. When it's on your error 404 page, it acts when the error 404 page loads. Therefore, it happens after the rest of DNN has done its deal to redirect pages to the proper URLs, and it's a second chance for you to have a redirect action occur. But also, importantly, it would record its own database records on all of the URLs that hit the 404 page that were unsuccessful. And so I'll bring you up a couple of screens and describe it, but one of the reasons why I like this is it allowed us to create a list of hundreds of redirects, if we wanted to, that were not loading every time a page loads. They only were loading if a 404 redirect, 404 error page was the response. If it was going to go to the 404, it was our last chance to catch it and also to record it. So just kind of describing it a little bit in some screenshots. These are a little bit blurry, but basically you had two simple columns. You had old URL and new URL. One of the benefits to a very straightforward old URL and new URL column is that they did not have to be off of your domain. So your old URL could be XYZ, and your new URL could be apple.com. And you were able to redirect people out of this DNN instance if you needed to. That's something that you can't do with the core DNN URL rewriter and Eyefinity in that setup. Another thing to mention is that with this structure, you were able to redirect out to very specific query strings based on the very specific pages that came in. And you can do that to an extent with the current settings inside of X3, inside of that section of URL rewriting and URL friendlies, but not to the extent that it's a simple text file, one-to-one matchup of old URL, whatever the page structure was of it, to new URL with whatever the page structure is for that. So if you have dynamic pages with articles and IDs, and maybe they're not query strings, but they're folder-based paths that are dynamically being handled by the normal URL-friendly process, then you don't have a way to control that without a module like HJT Redirect in place. Now I'm going to show you at the end of this presentation what I do for that now in sites that I cannot run HJT within, because we're doing that in the web config or in the site URLs config files, and so I'll describe that. But in my opinion, it's not as good or as efficient as this HJT has been. I still swear by this HJT, and if you find my DNN 5 and 6 websites, I'm using this, and I'm loving it. So the second screen that I do want to show you as I finish the second screen is that it would record all URL traffic that hit the error 404 page. Therefore, it built thousands of records, many times, of the unquote undefined URLs. And any of those would show the number of hits that that undefined URL had been. So if it was handled because you'd put in a redirect rule, then it would still count the number of hits, but it would send it off to the right page and deliver to Google and everyone a 301, 302, 404, whatever you want to have it assigned out that it was proper. But you would come back in a week, or you would come back 2 months later, and you'd be able to load it up, and you'd be able to see, well, this URL was hit 52 times. This 404 URL was hit 106 times. Well, obviously, I need to set up a permanent redirect from whatever that is to whatever it is now. Great. Now it's solved problems. And after a new site publish or a migration from some other system, we would come back every 2 or 3 weeks and just get the list, and everything that was 10 or above, we'd set up redirects for them. And after a few times of that, we didn't have that many redirects that were still out there not being handled. So again, that's a good purpose or a benefit of it. And of course, the fact that it's storing those in the database and storing and calling them up on load means that we're not slowing down the rest of the system. They're happening only after that 404 decided action has been called or is happening. So I do have a link to that and where you can still download it and use it. But today, especially in DNN 7 and 8 sites where I'm not able to use HJT because of some of the other settings that we have going on in there, we have two other ways that we handle that today. And I'll actually start with the second one because that's a little bit more simple. But these are config redirects. These are things that you can do inside of your DNN instance that are either editing the web.config file or the site URLs.config file. The site URLs.config file is one that for a long time I wasn't really familiar with. A DNN integrator friend of ours uses this heavily. This is your best equivalent of your htaccess grant. That this allows you to create rules in which it is looking for one thing and it is redirecting or sending to the other thing. And these rules can be as complex as you want them to be. So in this screenshot here of the site URLs config, we can see that, for instance, edit module.aspx is what it's looking for, and then the asterisk gives us everything that's after the ASPX, and we're sending to default.aspx and then putting on that string afterwards. In that sense, especially if you look at like tab ID and some of these, it's very similar to that structure of creating regex type rules in which you are controlling what you're going to do and redirect into what. My caution that I am probably less qualified to speak about, but I understand the concern of, is you have to be careful what you put into this site URLs config. This runs on every single page request. So this is not something where you want to put in 150 rules. It will have to run and evaluate 150 rules on every single page load, and it can affect that. So you want to keep this as efficient and compact as you can. And if that means writing even more complex rules, I believe that's preferred to loading this up with a ton of different rules. If at the end of the day you've got one or two rules that you need to rewrite, like something where a blog used to be indexed and whatever it was before, let's just imagine it was a WordPress type of example, that it was such and such /blog/ whatever PHP, you're able to put in those rules so that now it's at /blog or whatever the transformed version is that is for your DNN instance. And that'll apply to article modules. Blog modules are the main ones that I can think of that are going to have those kinds of situations going on. The other one, though, is the web config version. And inside of web config, you were able to do a very similar type of thing. It impacts differently. It's not hit on every single page load. It's obviously on application startup. So I think there are also downsides to this, and you don't want to have 300 rules inside of this either. However, this is the only location that I could find to do some of the types of things that we needed to do in a recent publish, and that the original person asking these questions started off with. And they said, hey, I've got some HTML pages. I've got old site URLs that were bookmarked, they're heavily indexed by Google, and they're all .html type pages, and we need to redirect these to their new DNN equivalents. How do I handle that? How do I get HTML files redirecting? Because right now, these HTML files are giving an IIS level error. They're not even giving DNN's error 404. How do I do that? And so again, that was kind of the genesis of this meeting's review, and the web config is the way that that can be solved. So as far as the web config, what you're able to put in place is a rewrite section and have rules inside of there with match and action type information. And I have 3 here as example, and then a 4th one that gets into some other further details. The first 3 are really the same as each other. you're able to rename, name these rules, and these are just purple bunny feet, whatever you want to call them. They're your own name for these particular rules. Once they get hit, then they can stop processing as true.
Purple bunny feet?
Purple bunny feet is my phrase that I use that means it can be anything. The words don't matter. Purple bunny feet.
Sorry, I just couldn't let that one go.
So you feel free to use that in daily conversation. So the match value is your information for the URL that is being looked for or matched to for redirecting. And in this location, I have an example of 17-review.html, and that is redirecting to articles/detail/article ID/39/ the name of whatever that article was, review 9999. In this situation, you would have trouble redirecting to that inside of the DNN core because we're not putting in URL query strings, we're putting in the slashes in the beginning, and we're also, again, doing these redirects off of these HTML files. Folder structure is perfectly fine, so we have just a couple of examples of that. The fourth example is one in which there's a little bit more logic going on, because this is in the web config. Therefore, it applies to everything on that DNN instance. Because it applies to everything in that DNN instance, if you had a very straightforward is not the right word, if you had a very generic URL rewrites or redirect that was happening here, that you needed to redirect for portal 1, but for portal 2 and 3 and 4, you did not want that redirect to occur, then this is the way that you handle that. At that point, aside from the match URL of whatever the page was, again, .NET page, HTML page, doesn't really matter, you can put in a condition. And at that point, you can put in a condition in which HTTP post, you're looking for the pattern of, and you are redirecting or allowing that redirect to happen for a specific domain name, and then it would not occur for other ones. So it's not exactly portal-specific, Grant, but it is domain-specific. So if you're thinking of that htaccess equivalent, there are structures like that where you are making them for one domain and not for another. This is kind of that equivalent.
Can I ask you another?
Please, yeah, go ahead.
I've dealt with customers that have websites, and they've moved them 2 or 3 different times. And so these redirects
build up.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. And I'm thinking that at some point in time, you need to clean them out and let them go.
Sure, yeah.
Does anybody have a feel for what that answer is?
That's a really good question, and I'll kind of repeat just in case away from the microphone that was a little far in distance, but and actually, let's come back to it in just a second, because I've got one more screen to go to on this, and I'll come back around again. And the question was, when do you let go of those redirects? When do you let go of keeping track of how old things were? Google certainly appreciates it if you're doing redirects and giving that information of 301, 302, giving that information, but after a while, it's a really good point. When do you drop off the old? I don't know that I have a good answer for that other than just to say, if it doesn't seem like it's getting a lot of traffic and a lot of activity, that'd be my first time to get rid of it. There's a balance for those rules and the efficiency of the rest of the website for those rules. So culling those or spring cleaning every once in a while is a really good idea. In this example where these rules are in this web config, I've advised the client, the developer, to put in a bunch at the time of publish, but then 6 months later pull them out because you're not going to need them at that point. Yeah, Google will have already indexed and come through, and so will anyone else who had bookmarks. And after that, maybe tough cookies or send them to the error 404. That's where they need to be. Okay. In this web config version, I gave examples of the HTML extension being one of the ones that's handled. And that's kind of the last part of this presentation, is explaining how to even have .NET Nuke manage or use its URL, its error 404 page for URL file types that are not, just folder structure, therefore they go to DNN, or ASP.NET pages in your actual pages in your DNN site. And that is done by adding a few things into your DNN web config. If you are running on a new enough version of DNN, of IIS, then it's going to be in the system.web server section. If not, I thought I corrected that. This block needs to go inside that as well. If you're on an older version of IIS, then it's going to be in the system.web section. But they are both versions of the same type of command or control. I'll do the old one first since I'm on it and highlighted. And that is that you are able to put in for HTTP handlers any other file type that you want to put in there. You can put in HTML and HTML. You have to put them in separately if you want it to handle both of those. In the past, we have put in PHP so that we can handle redirects from PHP. We put in JPEG before when we wanted to have the 404 handler show up for JPEGs that were missing or different. I'll caution you though, if you're moving a site from an old one to a new one, and there were a lot of people using those images, that could really mean that your 404 page is hammered for images, but again, you're doing it on purpose, so hopefully there's an intent for wanting that kind of redirect to occur. So that's the older IIS versions. If you're in IIS 7 or above, then you're going to use the system.web server. And in that situation, there's basically one mode if you are in Classic and the other mode if you're in Integrated Pipeline method. And at that point here, you can see that we are giving that example of an HTML file. You can easily put in one row or one of these lines for every other type of file you want to process. I wouldn't go hog wild and put 16 in here because, again, you're increasing the amount of file types that are going to be managed by your error handler if those files don't exist. If those files exist, great, they're going to run. If they don't exist, then they're going to hit the 404 process, and that could take you all the way through to your error 404 page, or if you have other redirect things happening, it will take it into those other redirects. So once this is in place, those web config redirects will work if you're trying to redirect HTML pages. If this isn't in place, then those HTML pages are still going to be handled by IIS and what it does for error handling based on whatever's going on in the server. So at that point, we're kind of through the series of things that I wanted to run through, and ultimately the question that I wanted to help answer here, which is, I've got a bunch of old HTML pages. How do I redirect those? How do I have .NET Nuke manage those HTML pages? And we started off by kind of starting in the history of URL rewriting and redirects. We ran through a few key modules, and we finished with the web config and the site configs. I'll leave for further reading for you guys a series of other links and information. If you have other suggestions, I'd love to see them. Come bring them into the comments of this blog article and post in information. There are a few modules that I'll mention that we have used heavily. If we need to put any more time into this presentation, then I would spend some time talking about DNN Sharp's redirect toolkit. At the moment, I'll just mention it by name and describe a couple of things about it. We've used DNN Sharp's redirect toolkit for some very specific key purposes that at one point in time, they were the only module that could handle doing that, such as taking a geolocation IP address and redirecting based on your country of origin. So if you were browsing from Australia, it would redirect you to the portal that you set up for Australia or to a completely different website if your originating IP address was Australia. So that country-based geolocation redirect was something that at one point in time, this was the only way to do that I was aware of. It can get really specific. Zip code-based, city and state-based, again, country-based. But then it has a load of other types of redirects that are possible. Role-based redirects, referrer-based redirects, there's a large list of those. I'll mention another variation on a way that we've used the redirect toolkit before, in which we will place it on the home page of a website so that if something comes in on a specific domain name, and it really needs to go to a folder or to a section in that website, or to a specific page on that website, but we've put it into the portal aliases. We put it into the portal aliases because we want it to load for the whole website and go to the right location, but now we need to go to a specific page if it's that domain. Well, if you put DNN Sharp's redirect toolkit on your home page and you set up a domain-based redirect, then it can take that home page landing and load you over to that domain's section or special page in your website. It's also possible for you to turn on those rules to be global, so it will happen on every single page. But in my usage or purpose, most often it's been to leave it just on the home page if they're putting in that domain with no other specific URLs behind it. Now, just to kind of go on and describe a few other ones, there are a few other redirect type modules, and I don't want to leave them out. Weaves, DNN Dynamic Redirect, and DNN Smarts Super Redirector both host a list of features and functions that are very similar to what is seen in DNN Sharp. Either one of those could be excellent, superior modules. I haven't used them yet myself, and if you get into using them and you like them over DNN Sharp, or you have some other features that you'd like to point out, put them in the comments. I'd love to have those conversations. Additionally, there are some other variations of things. DNN Smart also has a mobile redirector that in its mobile redirection can change the skin, change the container, hide and remove things off the page at a server level so that they are not just hidden by style, they're actually being hidden straight out. That's not always what you want to do these days, but it's still something that clients ask for sometimes, and it can be useful. There's also another from WEWare that is a friendly URLs type item. DNN Sharp does have a URL adapter, and that is a replacement or swap out for what is essentially the core Eyefinity URL rewriter. So if you're interested in checking out a different flavor of URL handling, then you are able to use and install DNN Sharp's URL adapter and essentially turn it on instead of the advanced, which is the core DNN URL rewriter. And it boasts a series of features and functions and similar types of things. Again, myself, I haven't used it, but I did want to mention it. And then finally, just the last few set of links to mention. You do run into problems sometimes with your URLs and rewriting things, especially with articles. And we find it often enough with work that we're doing in Xmod Pro, where we're throwing all kinds of things up in the URL, that you can run into problems with special characters. For instance, plus signs often will cause a problem, whereas they used to be okay inside of URLs. With standard settings, they can really blow up what's going on those pages. And the older Eyefinity URL rewriter blog articles talk a little bit about how to handle that, things you can do inside of IIS and things you can do inside of Eyefinity type settings to help mitigate problems with plus symbols in URLs. So I wanted to point that out. There's a kind of a larger overview article about the way that 404 handling works, and that's on the DNN Wiki. Additionally, there's one there on URL rewriting. And then I'll kind of finish by mentioning that most article modules, most blog modules, they have their own URL provider that's been written for Eyefinity and now for the DNN Core. And you're able to install those URL providers so that they can transform the URLs exactly the way they want to. Many of those things are just default these days. You used to have to install them very specially or specifically. But I mentioned the links to those because you might need to make those yourself. You might have built something that's very custom on your own, and you need to build a URL provider that's going to work with the DNN Core so that it can rewrite and restructure the way you need it to. And that could be the topic of a whole nother meeting or presentation that's a dev meeting. But again, I did want to finish with those just to describe that you don't stick with just what's there. You can extend that and create your own providers. And there's some links there to some that you can use as examples. With that, that's kind of the wrap up here of URL rewriting, and again, our very first session in which we're doing question and answer. So I'd like to encourage everybody, if you've got questions, something you'd like to see expounded upon or verbosely discussed, please send those questions in to us. Get them to us on Twitter. Get them to us in the info@southernfrieddnn.com email address, or catch any of us on email or chat where you'll find us. And we'd love to take those questions and get them into future sessions. Clint and David, before I pass over, any other questions that maybe came up in chat or things that people were asking?
Did not see anything.
All right.
Well, Will Troll asked what module does not exist that you wish exists, but I don't think that's related to the URL rewriter.
In some sense, I was mentioning that the HJT redirect doesn't work within some of the standard modern settings that I put into DNN 8 and 9 these days. So I really am only able to use it in older DNN 7s with a specific configuration put in place. DNN 5 and DNN 6, it can go into without any problem whatsoever. So that could easily be me not understanding some settings that I could do to make it work in DNN 8 and 9, but I've had to leave behind HJT, so I was saying that was one that I'd love to see some new conversation around if that was possible. All right, sounds like we need to make some new modules. Andrew comes in. All right, with that, we're going to pass the mic over to David Poindexter. He's going to talk a little bit about this very small little endeavor that he's put together. nvQuickSite has been credited as being one of the easiest, fastest ways to install DNN onto almost any environment for development purposes and setup purposes. Inside of DNN Con, when we were doing DNN Baltimore, when we were doing DNN Summit in the past, it has been the way that we've quickly installed DNN. We've been in sessions where we're running a DNN instance and we just need to stand up a new one, and it's not too hard while you're talking with one set of mind on what you're saying to, on another screen, just begin running a brand new DNN install. And that's because of the power of this thing that is no joke, a major endeavor and a major benefit that David and Envisionative have put together in nvQuickSite. So we've had previous sessions before where we've talked about nvQuickSite and seen how it works. You can go back on the southernfrieddnn.com site or our YouTube channel to see those past videos. But we're here now to hear a little bit about what's in the future and what's new with nvQuickSite. There you go, David.
Yeah, appreciate it. So just wanted to kind of, for some of you that may not be familiar with nvQuickSite, as Ryan was saying, it is an application that we have developed. It's a desktop application that allows you to very quickly, and by quickly, let me quantify that, usually less than 1 minute total, to set up and install your DNN instance. And not have to worry about permissions and files and worried about URL redirects and things like that. So setting up the database and kicking off the install of DNN, even doing some things to pre-configure that setup in DNN a little bit. So you can find out more about nvQuickSite at nvQuickSite.com. And you'll be able to, there's quite a bit of documentation thanks to Will Stroll, who was on the call, who helped me a lot with the original documentation on this. And so if you have not checked it out, I do encourage you to go out there and download it, give it a test spin, and see how it goes. People find uses for this in many different ways. If you want to set up a quick site, if you're a module vendor and you need to troubleshoot very quickly when you get a support request because of some issue on one specific version of DNN or something like that, just in a matter of a minute, being able to set that up locally, install your module, and test it out and see if you can see what the client's doing. Other people want to utilize it just to spin up quick dev instances where you're in development of something. There's just a plethora of reasons why you would want to utilize this tool. The intent with this from the very beginning was to really replace an older solution that was out there, developed by someone else in the community that had to move on to some other things. And it's done a good job of filling that space, but the intent all along was to gain interest from others that are interested in this tool and take it to the next level. So part of this, I'll tell you what's been discussed on some of the roadmap, but also just implore any of you that have any experience with this whatsoever, you don't have to be a developer, can actually chime in and give your 2 cents on what could make this better, what could improve the user experience. One of the most recent versions that we deployed, I'm going to switch over to GitHub here, where the code is all open source out here, and you can get to it. It's github.com/envisionative/nvQuickSite. And in the most recent release, it's version 1.1.0, and we added some error handling here for when you don't have internet access. Some other things that we really did a lot to improve the user experience. Now I'll highlight that. The install package info is really, a lot of it's pre-populated. The site info is pre-populated. Database information is pre-populated off of some of the original things that you put in, and also just the flow of all that. You used to have to click quite a bit more to be able to get to the install there, but now you can get through that very quickly, and actually even we've got that speed down below that 1 minute mark. But what is planned for the future? One of the things that would really help out, you know, a lot of, especially developers in the DNN community, have really built their own processes for quickly spinning up local DNN dev instances and so forth. And one of the requests that we've received quite a bit is to, hey, can we take this user interface and actually make it available via command line so that we can script and do our own little things? Because not everybody wants to just set up a vanilla, you know, DNN instance. They want to do some additional stuff after that's completed. So one of the big items on the roadmap is to make this available via command line so that it can be scripted out, be it PowerShell or whatever, you know, mechanism you're using for scripting out bat files or whatever, and integrating that into a larger process. It's not that big of an endeavor, actually, so if there's anyone that does have Windows Forms development experience, I'd love to collaborate with you. Don't want this to just continue just being me on this, so if anybody wants to be involved, please be sure to connect on the GitHub site and really start chiming in. I'll point you to one area here where we collect all of this information, and that's in the Issues tab out on GitHub, and you'll see there's quite a bit of issues that are in here, and we've gone through and tagged the ones where we're looking for a little bit of help as help wanted. So if you find one of these particular areas that is of interest to you, you know, maybe you're like, hey, I really want to try to tackle, you know, eliminating the whole install wizard in the process, you know, being the DNN install wizard. That could be a nice endeavor for someone to sink their teeth into. It may be some, hey, I keep getting this annoying little random issue that pops up about folder permissions, and I think I could probably figure that out. You know, that would be something where you can jump in as well. The other item that's kind of right on the top of the radar is to do right now the repository or the list of all the available versions of DNN are self-hosted by Envisionative on our server. So anytime there is a new DNN release, we need to go and we need to make a slight modification to an XML file that sits on the server. It's nothing real complicated, but if we're busy on a project or out of the country or whatever, you know, it would be nice to have that in a different place so that it can quickly make it available, because as soon as that file is modified, it immediately shows up in everybody's desktop application because it reads that file. So that is another thing. We want to move the actual list of all the versions and latest version, actually put it in the repo itself in GitHub, which is not a big undertaking there. It'd be pretty simple for us to do. We just haven't done it yet. So that one will be coming up next as well. So there's plenty of other ideas in the making, even some big ideas like updates of DNN, handling upgrades. You know, that's quite a bit different animal than the original installation. So that would be probably a more mountainous task to cover all the situations and try to figure that out. But you know, everything from those big ideas to even some of the small ones in here, welcoming all of them. I think now we want to invest more in this, but we also want to build, you know, a team around this. Yeah, exactly. So, so part of why I wanted to, you know, share some of this with you is really just to put the feelers out there and see if there's anyone that maybe is watching this replay or joining us live here that would like to be involved in the team. So, welcome anyone that would like to get involved.
All right. Just keeping track of things in the chat. There were some questions, but I don't know if there were any specific. Pete had some suggestions on where you might keep track of some of those list type items as well. Yeah, were there any other questions? Since I'll open the floor up to questions from the folks online. Does anyone have any questions for David about nvQuickSite or kudos or accolades for how you used it to do some pretty amazing things?
This is Clint. I have a question, and I would also like to give kudos.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So obviously, kudos, David. It's an awesome tool. I mean, I definitely love to use it, and I know everybody that uses it does. My question is around onboarding new users. So, for example, you know, a lot of times I'll go out to a high school or college or whatever, and I'm talking to, you know, a high school class. And what I'm wondering is the barrier for entry into getting DNN installed. Obviously, you have to have SQL Server installed on the machine and IIS and all that kind of stuff. Would it be possible, and I'm not saying, hey, go do this, I'm just feasibility-wise, would it be possible to have a screen that's like, yes, I have, you know, SQL Server and I want to install it locally, or no, I don't have any of that and I just want to install it. And then if someone was to opt for that route, could they then maybe spin up an instance using your tool, but rather have it live on managed servers or in Azure or on your servers or just somewhere else, so that it could kind of make it a little bit easier for people to install if they were, you know, completely like clue negative, just trying to get it installed. Is that technically possible?
Well, I would say anything's technically possible, but for anybody that has gone through the joy of installing SQL Server, it's not a straightforward process. I mean, kicking off that process from this is a good idea, though. So making that possible. Hey,
that's what I'm trying to get around is so they don't have to install SQL Server. That's essentially my question.
Yeah, and connecting to other locations other than local, that's approachable.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the recommendations that come from some people is being able to connect to Azure or some cloud databasing service. And is it doable? Yes. Will it take a little bit of work? Yeah, probably so, because right now everything is fairly, it's very centric to your local environment, and it's dealing with local permissions, and it's in a Windows port. You know, so there's some challenges to come through there, and but absolutely it could be done. Andrew
chimed in and said that you should be able to do a silent install of SQL Server Express, perhaps.
And again, that's a possibility.
I was going to say, you can do a silent install of SQL Server Express. I don't know if you could do it you should be able to do it in the full one. I haven't done it in a long time. Personally, I just punt everything to Azure for SQL because it's simpler for our user experience and for me to handle.
Yep, definitely some things to think about there.
David, or it could be a small lead gen tool, you know?
Yeah,
there you go.
Just an idea. I was just wondering. I appreciate it.
No, good question. I think that's exactly the kind of feedback that David's wanting to get from folks to get involved.
So Ryan keeps saying that my idea of, because I've got multiple portals on one instance, and he keeps calling it the holy grail of being able to go in, grab one portal, separate it out. Wow, whatever that noise was really loud.
Yeah.
So would it be possible, or what steps would it take to say, hey, I want to nvQuickSite off a portal? Maybe it's even just harvesting content and just dropping it in, but would there be any future of saying, hey, go to this portal and make a separate site of it, a separate instance and everything?
Yeah, it's a long discussion topic, and I mention it as the holy grail. It's unattainable, but it's not. It's just impossibly complicated, is what I would describe it as. And
one step, and you're just completely melted.
Yeah, one step, and you melt like wax figures looking at the holy grail.
But instead, it's your client's website that melts.
So one thing I'll mention there, and I put it into the chat, is that For years, we've asked backup type companies because that might be an easier handle into something like this rather than nvQuickSite where you're setting up something brand new and blank. Backup modules, Tiva backup, other types of backup modules, and I've talked with folks there to say, you know, is this possible? And they've said they've talked about it many times, and it's just so complicated because of the module nature of what everyone puts in place. And you get just one or two module developers who don't follow a portal structure in the same way that everyone else follows the portal structure, and immediately the house of cards falls apart. So you can probably copy something, and you probably get a lot of stuff that's going to be correct, but so much has to be correct for it to work correctly, that it's a so complicated thing. If it's a blank instance of DNN and it's only HTML modules, maybe that'd be a lot easier. But the minute you get other custom modules in place,
you're coming from a scenario where you've got so many different things that have portal IDs involved.
Yeah.
And so this was Portal 7 on the old instance.
And now it's Portal 1, and
you don't want it to be Portal 7 alone on a new instance. You want it to be Portal 0. So,
but that said,
to
finish off, and then I'll pass back to David and Grant. But to finish off, DNN Sharp, when they were on with Southern Fried 4 months ago, I think now, DNN Sharp unveiled a management tool that can be used across multiple DNN instances to help copy, to help reproduce, to help check on, to patch and update. And their tool, Bogdan did mention that they had a line on this specific question, Pete, about how can I peel off one portal. And we all chuckled at the time knowing how complicated it is. And we said, seriously, you have a lead on that? And they said, yeah. Talk to us about the details, but we do. We do that all the time with this particular tool. So somebody in the community has approached it. It's still monumentally hard, is my opinion.
My thoughts are, if you could take a portal, again, I understand all these other modules and components that might be sitting on the server and being pulled in, Xmod Pro being a good example. That, okay, you're not going to be able to pull Xmod Pro off, or if you did pull Xmod Pro off, you've got some licensing problems, you've got all that code that now needs to somehow be iterated to work in this new instance. But if you could get 80% of a site back up and running off on its own, I mean, that's 20% of the work you only have to do versus 80%, 100%.
Well, Grant, you were going to say?
Well, I was just wondering why you don't copy the whole thing and just delete the portals.
Thank you. Grant, that's exactly where I was going to pass Pete, is that if you're talking about 80% copy and a mystery unknown of a bunch of stuff broken, the safer way is just make a complete copy and then go through and manually delete other portals. That's assured to work better than the other.
And that is definitely something that I would consider, and Ryan and I have talked about in the past. I suddenly got really quiet. Okay. But now my question to you, Ryan, and to the audience is, what could go wrong in that instance? Either way, I don't really care. What could go wrong there?
Other things. I think we'll kind of rein in this conversation and let's turn it into a segment for another meeting, because we can definitely get into that in details and shoot.
Right, and
run through it in examples and see what does well and what doesn't. I'd love to.
You're going to have the standard migration from one server to another.
Yeah. Let me do two things.
Good point.
David, I'm going to pass it back to you for a second. I'm going to pass it back to you for a second, David, and then I'll ask if you can pass the screen back over to me for a moment. There was one important screen in my presentation I missed getting to a moment ago. Yeah. But did you have anything else in nvQuickSite that you wanted to wrap up with?
Yeah, so one other teaser I will put out there is that in the coming release of DNN, which is 9.2, prompt will be a part of it.
If you haven't seen prompt, that's also another previous Southern Fried meeting where we had two different meetings where Kelly Ford came on and not only presented DNN prompt, but then also talked about extending DNN prompt. Both of those are highly exciting.
Yeah. And there's been some conversations around potential integrations between nvQuickSite and prompt and so forth, and some really neat things that might be able to be done. There's definitely a lot of room for growth in this. So again, I would love to invite anyone to be involved. If you're with us live or watching the replay, please reach out via the GitHub and or me personally, you can.
All right. So if I'll grab screen back, I want to talk for just a moment about that set of web config redirects. I think I forgot to share or show one of my favorite new tools here. You working on it? Yeah. David's passing me back screen so I can bring that up online. It is one of the links that's mentioned inside of the blog article, so it's there so that you can see that. But I wanted to mention that these redirect rules, the ones that are, and I'll kind of pause for a second so they come up on the screen. All right, there we go. That these redirect rules that go into the web config, again, the version that goes in the web config that has the match and action style of commands, you can obviously start from one that is set up already, and you can begin following those rules and copying and pasting to produce those. But I also want to share a tool that I found only recently, maybe a month ago or so. That is an online tool. It's at html-online.com. I'm not 100% sure who built this, but it's pretty fantastic. It is specifically trained to DNN, and it is a 301 rewrite rule generator. And what this allows you to do is to paste into two different sides of the screen, and you can work from a spreadsheet very easily or a text file, and you can paste in a full series of redirect, the original URL links on the left, and you can paste in your new structure on the right. I think this is very, very useful to use when you've got a spreadsheet in which you've created a bunch of old crawl URLs and your redirects where you want to paste them to, and you can put them in place here. And if I put in DDD and DDD and if I put in my old URL links and my new redirect tos, and I click to generate, then it automatically builds for you that set of rewrite rules that you can just drop into your web config. So again, you don't want to be hog wild and have hundreds of these in here, but if you did have hundreds, this tool would make it very quick and simple to put that together. And it also does give you a little bit of information about how to use those and make sure you understand that you are beginning with that URL without the /. So you are going straight from whatever it was to then whatever it is going to, and at that point it adds the /. So your rule there is without that /, and this format structure tool helps you get that format structure. So I wanted to make sure I didn't miss that on that overview. With that, we've here reached about 8 o'clock, and it's time for us to wind down this meeting of the Southern Fried DNN Youth Group. Thank you to everybody that joined us online. Thank you to everybody that joined us here in person. I will pass it over to David and Clint one more time, see if you guys have any other closing items or if there were any other items that popped up in chat.
Well, I did want to mention that Andrew Hopping is joining us. He's joined us tonight, but we're looking forward to a presentation from him next month. So be sure to join. And Andrew, thanks for joining us. It's very, very nice having you on
Absolutely.
board.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Next month's meeting is going to be third Thursday is October the 19th. So October the 19th, we'll be hearing from Andrew and having him come on to present with us. We will at that point have further information on DNN Summit. We'll have DNN Summit training information and try and get some more buzz going there about things that you can send people to for training. And again, we'll connect in with everything DNN Buzz related from the community, because I guarantee you in the next 30 days we're going to have some exciting, fun information pop up from everything that's now happening with DNN Corp and the rest of us who are all getting re-engaged and re-energized with this buzz that's going on. Any other final comments, David or Clint, before we close for the night? All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. We are going to retire to our favorite watering hole and get some food and some drinks. Hopefully you can enjoy live. Thank you very much, and see you guys in October. Thank you.
Have a good night, guys.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.